but from one. The space station Helios Prime hung in the quiet dark between stars, a silver ring turning slowly against the black. Inside, diplomats from a dozen alien species moved through wide halls, their voices a mix of clicks, hums, and translated words. Humans had only been allowed to sit at the edge of the Galactic Accord Council for 6 months, and most of the other species still treated them like children who had wandered into a war room by mistake. To the Cathar, with their chitinous limbs and compound eyes, humans were soft, loud, and emotional. To the Varel, whose bodies shimmered like living glass, humans seemed chaotic, driven by feelings instead of logic. None of them believed Earth had a real military. They had seen old videos of human wars, messy, brutal, full of mistakes, and assumed that was still all humanity could manage. On the lower observation deck, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Brooks stood near a viewport, arms behind his back, watching a supply shuttle dock. He was tall, with close-cropped gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He wore a plain green uniform with no flashy tech, no glowing insignia, just a name tag and rank pins. Beside him, Sergeant Marcus Hale adjusted the strap of his sidearm, scanning the crowd with calm focus. Their team was small, just 4 soldiers assigned to the United Nations Interstellar Liaison Office as a symbolic security presence. In truth, they spent most days guarding empty storage bays or standing politely behind human diplomats during boring meetings. Corporal Lena Ruiz was checking comms near the East Corridor, while Specialist Jake Owens ran a routine scan on the environmental controls. They were professionals, but to the galaxy they were invisible. Then the alarms went off. Not the soft chime of a system warning, but the deep, pulsing shriek of an emergency breach. Lights flickered red. Alien delegates froze, then scattered in panic. From the main concourse, sharp, chittering cries echoed, Cathar battle calls. A rogue faction of the hegemony had struck. Dozens of armored Cathar warriors painted in black war marks stormed the central dome where the summit was being held. They weren't here for negotiation. They wanted blood and chaos. Security drones shorted out in sparks. Varel guards raised their crystalline shields but hesitated, waiting for orders that never came. The Cathar moved fast, cutting down anyone in their path, but Brooks didn't run. He didn't shout. He simply tapped his wrist comm and said one word, lockdown. Instantly, his team moved. Hale sprinted toward the west access tunnel, pulling civilians into side rooms. Ruiz sealed bulkheads with a handheld override, her fingers flying over the controls. Owens rerouted power to emergency lighting and jammed local comms to stop the enemy from coordinating. Brooks stepped into the open corridor, weapon drawn, but not raised. He counted 8 Cathar moving in 2 squads. They hadn't expected resistance. They certainly hadn't expected humans. Ruiz, Vent 3 is clear. Send the Talari envoy through, Brooks said calmly. Owens, I need smoke in Sector G in 30 seconds. Hale, hold the medical bay. No one gets past you. His voice never rose. It didn't need to. Every word was precise, every order timed. The team responded like parts of a single machine. The Cathar reached the junction near the council chamber. One spotted Brooks and charged, mandibles flaring. Brooks sidestepped, fired twice, center mass, then headshot. The alien dropped. The others slowed, confused. Humans weren't supposed to move like that, weren't supposed to aim like that. From a service hatch above, Ruiz dropped a flashbang. The corridor lit white. While the Cathar reeled, Hale and Owens hit them from the flanks with controlled bursts. 2 more fell. The rest fell back, regrouping. Brooks didn't chase them. He knew their job wasn't to win a battle. It was to save lives. He radioed the station's central AI, feeding it real-time enemy positions. Within minutes, automated turrets, previously disabled by the attackers, came back online, pinning the Cathar in the main hall. By the time official peacekeeper forces arrived, 10 minutes later, delayed by confusion and protocol, the fighting was over. 23 diplomats from 7 species had been evacuated safely. The Cathar assault team was either dead or disarmed, and the 4 humans stood in the center of the ruined concourse, reloading, checking each other for injuries, already planning the next move. The lead Varel commander, his crystalline form cracked from a near miss, stared at Brooks. You did this with 4? Brooks wiped dust from his brow. We had a job to do. News of the incident spread fast. Security footage showed the humans moving with eerie calm. No panic, no wasted motion. They used cover, communicated in short phrases and never lost sight of their objective. Alien analysts replayed the clips again and again, trying to find hidden tech, neural implants, anything to explain how 4 humans had done what an entire peacekeeper battalion failed to do. They found nothing. Just training. Just discipline. Back on Earth, in a quiet office at Unified Earth Defense Command, General Olivia Grant watched the same footage. She didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She simply leaned forward and said to her aide, "Get me Rivera. It's time." On Helios Prime, Brooks and his team were ordered to stand down, but as they walked back to their quarters, aliens who once ignored them now stepped aside. Some even bowed. The humans said nothing. They just kept walking because to them it wasn't heroism. It was Tuesday, and the galaxy, for the first time, began to wonder what else these soft, loud, emotional humans might be capable of when they stopped being polite and started being soldiers. Part 2. After the Helios incident, the galaxy could not stop talking about the humans. Videos of Brooks and his team spread through data streams and public forums. Alien scholars debated how 4 soldiers had held off a Cathar strike force. Some claimed humans used secret weapons. Others said they must have been enhanced with hidden tech. No one believed the truth, that they were just well-trained professionals doing their duty. On Earth, General Olivia Grant saw the moment for what it was: a chance. For years, Earth had been ignored, laughed at, or pitied by the older spacefaring races. Now they had a sliver of respect. She would not waste it. Within weeks, she ordered the deployment of a full human military unit to the Rimward territories, a lawless stretch of space caught between the Cathar hegemony and the Varel Concord. Officially, the humans were peacekeepers. Unofficially, they were there to show the galaxy what a real army looked like. Captain Nate Rivera led the mission. He was in his late 30s with a calm voice and steady hands. He had served in deserts, jungles, and frozen mountains on Earth. Space was just another battlefield to him. His battalion, 500 soldiers, arrived on the mining colony of Viridia, aboard 3 unmarked transport ships. They carried no flashy armor, no plasma cannons, no cloaking devices, just rifles, body armor, rations, and a mountain of planning. Viridia was a mess. The colony sat on a planet rich in rare metals, fought over by raiders, smugglers, and both major powers. Buildings were half ruined. Civilians lived in fear. The local defense force, mostly volunteers with old weapons, had given up trying to hold the perimeter. When Rivera stepped onto the dusty landing pad, the colony governor, a tired man named Elias, shook his head. "You're too few," Elias said. "The Cathar hit us twice last week. They'll come again." Rivera just nodded. "Then we'll be ready." The humans got to work. First, they mapped every street, every tunnel, every blind spot. Then they built strong points. Not flashy forts, but smart positions using existing structures. They dug trenches behind rubble walls. They set up listening posts with simple motion sensors. They trained local volunteers not to charge into fights, but to report, hide, and wait. Sergeant Maya Lin organized civilian safety drills. She taught families how to reach shelters in under a minute. Corporal Dev Patel set up a field hospital in an old storage hangar, stocked with medkits and clean water. Private Chris Dawson, barely 20, rewired the colony's broken power grid so lights and comms would stay on during an attack. The aliens watched. The Varel sent observers. The Cathar sent spies. Both expected the humans to fail quickly. They did not understand that human soldiers were not just fighters, they were builders, teachers, and planners too. Then the attack came. It was just before dawn. Over 60 Cathar warriors riding armored skiffs charged the eastern ridge. They expected chaos, panic, easy targets. Instead, they hit a wall of fire. Machine guns hidden in sandbag nests opened up. Tripwires triggered smoke canisters, blinding the attackers. Drones, simple store-bought models fitted with flares, rose into the sky, lighting the battlefield like midday. The Cathar skidded to a halt, confused. Rivera stood in the command post, a reinforced bunker under the main comm tower. He spoke into his headset, calm and clear. "Alpha team, hold fire. Let them bunch up. Bravo, flank left. Charlie, prepare the AT rounds." His soldiers did not shout. They did not curse. They moved like water, filling gaps, reloading, shifting positions without being told. When a Cathar broke through near the water tower, 2 privates cut him down before he took 3 steps. When a skiff tried to circle the west gate, a hidden anti-armor team fired a single rocket. The explosion lit the sky. Within 20 minutes, the Cathar were retreating. They left behind 50 in dead 2 wrecked skiffs and a broken morale. The humans had 1 minor injury, a sprained ankle from jumping a trench. The next day, the colony changed. People walked taller. Children played outside again. Farmers returned to their fields. The local defense force asked the humans to train them. Rivera agreed, but only if they followed the rules. Discipline first, courage second, word spread. A Cathar warlord, furious at the loss, sent a message. "Next time, we bring fire from the sky." Rivera read the translation and handed it back. "Tell him we'll be waiting." He knew another attack would come, bigger, meaner. So he prepared. He had his engineers dig deeper bunkers. He set up decoy camps with fake heat signatures. He rotated his troops so no one got tired. Most importantly, he made sure every soldier knew the mission. Protect the people, hold the ground, and never let fear decide the plan. When the second attack came, it was at night. The Cathar brought drop pods and heavy plasma cutters. They landed in 3 places at once, hoping to split the human defense, but Rivera had expected that. His teams had practiced for it. While one squad held the main gate with loud, flashy fire, another moved silently through drainage tunnels to hit the enemy from behind. A third team jammed the Cathar comms, so their squads couldn't talk to each other. Confusion spread fast among the attackers. They thought they were surrounded. They thought humans had more troops. They thought the colony was a trap. It was not a trap. It was just good planning. By sunrise, the Cathar were gone. Their drop pods were disabled. Their cutters were captured. Over 30 enemy fighters lay dead or captured. Not a single civilian had been hurt. This time, the Varel did not just send observers. They sent a delegation. Their leader, a tall being named Kalis, stood in Rivera's command tent and said, "You fight like no species we have seen. You do not seek glory. You do not take trophies. You simply win." Rivera poured 2 cups of coffee, one for himself, one for Kalis. "We don't fight to win," he said. "We fight so others don't have to." Kalis sipped the bitter drink and nodded slowly. "Then perhaps the galaxy has misunderstood you." Back on Earth, General Grant received Rivera's report. She read it once, then again. She did not smile, but her eyes softened. She turned to her staff and said, "Send the next battalion, and tell them no mistakes." On Viridia, the humans kept working. They fixed roofs. They shared rations. They taught children how to tie knots and read maps. To the colonists, they were not soldiers anymore. They were neighbors, but to the galaxy they were something new, something quiet, something dangerous, because now everyone knew. When humans showed up, the rules changed, and they never ever left a job half done. Part 3. After Viridia, the galaxy could no longer ignore Earth. Human tactics were studied in alien war colleges. Footage of Captain Rivera's defense was played frame by frame. Analysts tried to copy the way human squads moved, always covering each other, always thinking ahead, but they missed the point. It wasn't about the moves. It was about the mindset. Humans trained not just to fight, but to solve problems, protect civilians, and hold ground with patience. The Varel conquered, once skeptical, now saw value in this strange species. They proposed a joint mission: destroy a Cathar forward base hidden in the asteroid belt of the Draxus system. The base was small but dangerous. It launched raids on Varel supply lines and housed stolen data cores that could reveal Concord fleet positions. The Varel expected to lead the operation. They offered the humans a support role: guard the rear, watch the exits, maybe carry extra gear. Major Elena Foster read the proposal and laughed quietly. She was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed, with a voice that never rose but always commanded. She had taken over frontline command after Rivera was rotated back to Earth for debriefing. When the Varel liaison asked what she found funny, she said, "We don't do support roles when lives are on the line. We'll lead the assault." The Varel were stunned. No junior species had ever refused a supporting part, let alone demanded the lead. But they agreed, partly out of curiosity, partly because they had no better option. Foster's plan was simple but brutal in its precision. First, her team would send in stealth drones, cheap human-made models painted black and fitted with basic sensors, to map the base's layout. While the Varel waited for perfect intel, Foster acted on partial data. "We don't need to know everything," she told her officers. "We just need to know enough to get inside." The base sat inside a hollowed-out asteroid shielded by rock and energy dampeners. Most species would have bombarded it from orbit. Foster refused. Too risky for nearby civilian freighters. Too messy. She wanted surgical. Her team boarded 3 armored shuttles. No markings. No warnings. Just 50 soldiers, each carrying extra ammo, breaching charges, and medkits. Among them was Sergeant Maya Lin, now promoted, and Private Chris Dawson, whose knack for jury-rigging tech had saved Viridia. Dawson had built handheld signal scramblers from spare parts, devices that would blind the Cathar internal comms for 90 seconds. That was all Foster needed. They hit at shift change when guard rotations were weakest. The shuttles docked silently on the asteroid's dark side. Foster's team moved in pairs using hand signals, no radios. They cut through airlock seals with thermal lances. Inside, the base was dim, filled with the low hum of machinery and the sharp scent of Cathar pheromones. The first guard fell without a sound. Lin's knife found the joint in his armor. The second was taken down by a stun round from Dawson's modified rifle. Foster's team cleared corridors room by room, never rushing, never breaking formation. When they reached the central hub, they planted charges on the data core vault and set timers. Then the alarms blared. Cathar warriors poured from side tunnels, clicking and hissing in rage. Foster didn't retreat. She split her team. Half held the main corridor with disciplined fire. The other half, led by Lin, raced to the engine room to plant secondary charges, enough to cripple the base but not destroy it completely. Foster wanted the Varel to recover the wreckage to learn from it. Dawson stayed near the vault guarding the data cores. When a Cathar officer charged him, claws raised, Dawson didn't flinch. He fired 3 rounds into the alien's chest, then dragged the heavy core case toward the exit. His hands were shaking, but his steps were steady. Outside, the Varel ships finally moved in, not to attack, but to extract. They watched in silence as the humans emerged from the asteroid, carrying wounded, dragging data cores, moving like ghosts through smoke and sparks. The base shuddered behind them as the charges blew. Controlled, clean, total. Back on the Varel command vessel, their admiral stared at the mission logs. 0 human deaths, 2 wounded, both stable, all objectives complete. The Cathar base was neutralized. Their raiding routes were exposed, and the data cores held encryption keys that would protect Varel convoys for months. He turned to Foster. "You did not just win. You taught us how to win cleanly." Foster wiped soot from her face. "War isn't about winning. It's about ending it fast with as little pain as possible." The Admiral bowed his crystalline head. It was the first time a Varel had ever shown such respect to a human. News of the Draxus raid spread faster than any before. This time there was no doubt. Humans weren't lucky. They weren't hiding secret weapons. They were simply better at their job. Alien militaries began requesting human advisors. Some even asked to train under human NCOs. The Cathar, humiliated again, pulled back from several border zones. On Earth, General Grant watched the after-action reports with quiet pride. She knew the real test was coming. The Cathar wouldn't keep losing. They would adapt. And when they did, they would come with everything. But for now, the humans had done more than fight. They had changed the rules of war in the galaxy. They showed that strength wasn't just in firepower, but in restraint. That courage wasn't just in charging forward, but in holding the line for others. In a quiet corner of the command ship, Private Dawson sat cleaning his rifle. A young Varel cadet approached, hesitant. "Why do you risk so much for strangers?" he asked. Dawson looked up, smiled faintly. "Because someone has to." The cadet didn't understand, not fully, but he remembered the words. And across the stars, more and more beings began to see humans not as primitives, but as something rare, soldiers who fought not for conquest, but for peace. Who trained not to kill but to protect, who never broke because they knew what they were protecting was worth more than victory. The galaxy was learning, slowly, painfully, but it was learning, and the humans, they just kept working, because the job wasn't done. Part 4. The Cathar hegemony had lost too much. Their raids failed. Their bases fell. Their warriors spoke of humans not with scorn but with fear. In their ancient hives, the warlords gathered and made a choice. If they could not beat the humans with soldiers, they would crush them with terror. They unleashed the swarm, It was not a ship or a bomb. It was a living weapon. Billions of tiny machines wrapped in organic shells designed to eat metal, flesh, and energy alike. Once released, it grew by consuming everything in its path. It could tear through hulls, drain power cores, and dissolve armor like acid. The Cathar had used it once before, centuries ago, to wipe out a rebellious colony. They called it the Endless Hunger. Now they sent it toward the human-held sector, straight for Viridia. Alarms blared across the rimward territories. The Varel Concord ordered immediate evacuation. Even their crystal-shielded ships could not stop the swarm once it latched on. Civilian freighters scrambled to flee. Panic spread like fire. On Viridia, Governor Elias ran to Major Elena Foster's command post, his face pale. "We have to leave now. The swarm will be here in 2 days." "Nothing stops it." Foster stood at the map table, arms crossed. She had just received the full intel from Earth. The swarm was real. It was deadly. And it was coming fast. She looked at Elias. "We're not leaving." "You can't hold against that thing," he said, voice shaking. "It eats planets." "We're not trying to hold it off forever," Foster said. "We're trying to stop it," she called her team. Sergeant Maya Lin arrived first, followed by Private Chris Dawson, Corporal Dev Patel, and a dozen others. They gathered in the dim light of the bunker, faces grim but calm. Foster laid out the plan. It was risky. It might not work. But it was the only chance. First, they needed to understand the swarm. Dawson, with his knack for fixing the unfixable, studied old Cathar data fragments recovered from Draxus. He found a weakness. The swarm relied on electromagnetic signals to coordinate. Disrupt those and it would scatter, confused. "We can't stop it," Dawson said, eyes bright with focus. "But we can make it stupid," Foster nodded. "Then we make it stupid." They worked through the night. Dawson and Patel rewired every EMP generator they could find. Old mining tools, comms jammers, even kitchen microwaves stripped down to their cores. They built portable emitters that could be carried by foot patrols. Lin organized squads into rotating shifts, each trained to deploy the emitters in waves. Foster sent messages to every ship in orbit. No evacuations. Stand by for defense. Some captains refused and fled. Others, remembering Viridia's stand, stayed. When the swarm arrived, it came like a storm. A dark cloud rolling through space, swallowing light, eating debris, growing larger with every second. It hit Viridia's outer defenses and tore through them like paper. Metal towers melted. Solar panels vanished. The ground trembled as the swarm poured onto the surface, but the humans were ready. At the edge of the colony, the first line activated their EMP emitters. A pulse of energy rippled out. The front edge of the swarm shuddered, its tiny machines twitching, losing sync. It slowed. "Now," Foster said over the comms. Machine guns opened fire, not to kill, but to push. The swarm, confused and disoriented, bunched up. That was the moment Lin's team struck. They rolled thermal lances, long tubes that shot superheated plasma into the mass. The heat vaporized thousands of units in seconds, but the swarm adapted. It split, trying to flank the defenses. Dawson had expected that. He had rigged the colony's old atmospheric ionizers, used to clean dust from the air, to blast charged particles into the sky. When activated, they created a dome of static that scrambled the swarm's signals from above. Trapped between ground pulses and sky noise, the swarm writhed like a wounded beast. Still, it kept coming. It was endless. Foster knew they couldn't win by force alone. So she changed the battlefield. She ordered Patel to flood certain tunnels with coolant. The swarm, drawn to heat, avoided them. She had Lin's squads lay down trails of burning fuel, false paths that led the swarm into kill zones. Every move was a trap. Every retreat was a lure. For 3 days, the humans fought without sleep. They rotated, ate cold rations, patched wounds with field dressings. Civilians helped, carrying ammo, tending the wounded, even operating emitters under soldier supervision. No one ran. No one broke. On the 4th day, the swarm began to collapse. Without coordination, its units turned on each other, consuming their own kind in hunger. The cloud thinned. The ground stopped shaking. By dawn on the 5th day, it was over. The swarm lay dead, piles of gray dust and broken metal scattered across the fields. Viridia stood, not unharmed but unbroken. The Cathar, watching from afar, saw their ultimate weapon fail. Not to a bigger gun, not to a shield, but to human minds that refused to panic, human hands that kept working, and human hearts that chose to stand when running would have been easier. A message came from the hegemony. Short, simple. Ceasefire requested. Foster read it and handed it to Dawson. Looks like they finally learned. He grinned, tired but proud. Took them long enough. On Earth, General Grant received the full report. She stood alone in her office for a long time, looking at a photo of her first unit from decades ago. Then she sent one order: maintain readiness, but prepare for peace. Because the humans had done what no one thought possible. They had faced the endless hunger and made it end. And in that moment, the galaxy understood. Human soldiers were not just fighters. They were problem solvers, protectors, builders of hope in the darkest hours. They did not seek war, but when it came, they met it with calm, with courage, and with a quiet will that no machine, no monster, no empire could ever break. Part 5. The ceasefire held, not because the Cathar trusted the humans, but because they finally feared what would happen if they broke it. The swarm had been their last, darkest card, and it had failed. Now they sat in their hive world, silent, watching. The Varel Concord, once cautious, now looked to Earth not as a junior partner, but as a guide, and the rest of the galaxy waited to see what the humans would do next. They did not demand territory. They did not ask for tribute. They did not even celebrate. Instead, General Olivia Grant sent a message to the Galactic Accord. We propose a new set of rules for conflict. Rules that protect the innocent, limit destruction, and end wars faster. The offer stunned the Council. For centuries, galactic warfare had been brutal and total. Civilian colonies were targets. Surrender meant slavery. Peace was just the quiet between battles. No one had ever suggested that war could be fought with limits, let alone that such limits could make victory stronger. But the humans had proven it. At Helios, they saved diplomats instead of chasing glory. At Viridia, they shielded families while holding the line. At Draxus, they took only what was needed and left the rest intact. Against the swarm, they fought not to destroy, but to preserve. Now they were offering to teach others how to do the same. The Accord agreed to meet, not on a neutral station, but aboard the human orbital platform Aegis. It was a bold choice. The station had no weapons visible, no shields glowing. Just clean halls, working labs, and soldiers in plain uniforms moving with quiet purpose. Delegates from over 30 species arrived, stepping onto human metal for the first time. Major Elena Foster greeted them at the main airlock. She wore no armor, just her service uniform. She shook hands, or claws, or tendrils with each leader. No fanfare, no speeches, just respect. Inside the main chamber, General Grant stood alone at the front. She was not tall, but she filled the room with her presence. She spoke without notes, in simple words translated into every known language. We do not fight to rule, she said. We fight to protect. Our soldiers are trained to win, yes, but also to stop when the job is done. To help rebuild. To treat prisoners with dignity. To never forget that every life matters. She laid out the human doctrine of conflict. No attacks on civilians. No use of terror weapons. No destruction of hospitals or farms. And always a path for enemies to surrender without shame. She offered training programs, not to make other species fight like humans, but to help them build their own professional armies based on discipline, not rage. The Varel admiral who had once doubted humans now stood and asked, "Why give this away?" "This is power," Grant looked at him. "Power is nothing if it only brings more war. We offer this because peace is the real victory." After the meeting, delegates wandered the station. They saw human soldiers teaching alien cadets how to treat wounds, how to read terrain, how to lead without shouting. They saw engineers like Chris Dawson sharing schematics for simple, reliable tech. No secrets, no patents. They saw Sergeant Maya Lin sitting with children from a rescued colony, helping them draw pictures of home. One old Cathar warlord, his armor scarred from past battles, approached Captain Nate Rivera, who had returned to oversee the training program. The warlord's voice was rough, translated through a small device. "You beat us. Why help us now?" Rivera handed him a cup of water. "Because your people are tired. Ours are too. Maybe we can be tired together instead of fighting." The warlord drank. He did not speak again. But he stayed on the station 3 days longer than planned. Back on Earth, life went on. Farmers planted crops. Students went to school. Factories built not just weapons, but tools for rebuilding. The war had not made Earth rich or famous, but it had made the galaxy listen. Months passed. The new rules took root. Border clashes dropped by half. Civilian deaths fell sharply. Even the Cathar began training new units in restraint, something their elders called shameful, but their young called necessary. And through it all, the human soldiers remained. Not as conquerors, not as heroes, but as quiet partners. They stood guard when needed. They stepped back when not. They never asked for thanks. One evening on the observation deck of Aegis, a young Varel diplomat found Rivera watching the stars. The diplomat hesitated, then asked, "Why do you do this? You gain no land, no wealth, no say." Ong sung in your name. Rivera did not look away from the stars, because someone has to. The diplomat thought about that. He had seen human soldiers carry wounded enemies to safety. He had seen them share their last rations with strangers. He had seen them stand in the rain rebuilding a school while others celebrated victory. He finally understood. The humans were not powerful because of their guns or ships. They were powerful because they chose to care, even when it cost them. Even when no one was watching. And that was something no empire, no weapon, no ancient species could ever copy. The galaxy had spent centuries measuring strength in fire and force. Now, it was learning to measure it in patience, in protection, in the quiet courage to do what was right, not because it was easy, but because it was needed. The humans never claimed to be the best. They just showed up, did the work, and left the place better than they found it. And in that simple truth, the galaxy found something it had forgotten. Hope. Not loud. Not flashy. Just steady, like a soldier standing watch in the dark, making sure the light stays on for everyone else.